My husband called me a youthful mistake at his company party. 24 hours later, I showed him exactly what kind of mistake I could be. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. We love knowing how far our stories travel. Now, settle in and enjoy this captivating tale. Zahara stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, fastening her earrings, delicate pearl drops her mother had gifted her years ago. Her hands trembled ever so slightly, though she refused to acknowledge the nervousness even to herself. Tonight was the annual corporate gala for the high-powered advertising firm where Achilles worked. His agency, his success, his night, and she, as always, was expected to be the silent accessory at his side. From the closet hung the dark sapphire dress, sleek, elegant, understated. The same dress Achilles had once approved with a dismissive, "It's fine, not too flashy." Zahara brushed her fingers over the cool silk. Beautiful, yes. Expensive, yes, but somehow forgettable. Much like she felt she had become over the past few years. "Zahara, you almost ready? We have to leave in 30 minutes. Achilles' voice boomed from the bathroom. "I don't want to be late. This is a huge night. You understand?" "Yes, almost done," she replied, slipping into the dress and pulling the zipper up the side. A huge night for him, she thought. Velocity Media Achilles' agency had just secured a massive contract with a Fortune 500 tech company. 6 long months of negotiations, intense presentations, sleepless nights. Tonight was the victory lap. Zahara knew exactly how the evening would go. Achilles at the center, basking in admiration, shaking hands, collecting praise. She would stand beside him like a well-placed ornament, smiling when expected, nodding when appropriate, waiting for the inevitable, polite question. "So, and what do you do?" What would she say? "I'm a domestic engineer. I manage Achilles' life." Once she had had her own dreams. 20 years earlier, Zahara had graduated top of her class from Howard University with a degree in interior design. She dreamed of opening her own studio, designing homes that truly made people feel at peace. Then she met Achilles, charming, ambitious, full of big promises, and fell hopelessly in love. Back then, he told her they would build their dreams together, that he believed in her talent, that he would support her no matter what, and for a while, he did. They lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Southeast DC. Achilles worked at a boutique agency. Zahara assisted an interior designer. At night, they'd sit in the kitchen, drinking cheap 2-buck chuck, imagining the future. Achilles would pull her close and whisper, "We can do anything, Z. You'll see. In 10 years, you'll have your own studio, and I'll have my own firm." But life took its own turns. Achilles rose fast. He was charismatic, a master at winning clients and sealing deals. Within 5 years, he headed a department. 3 years later, he launched Velocity Media. The money came quickly. A luxury condo in Buckhead, a high-end SUV, vacations to the Bahamas, Dubai, wherever they pleased. And in the whirlwind of success, Zahara's dreams quietly faded into the background. It began subtly. Achilles asked her to help with paperwork, then to organize meetings, then to scout office spaces and design the agency's interior. Zahara told herself she was contributing to their shared future, even though she wasn't paid a cent. One night, Achilles said, "Z, why don't you stop working altogether? Why run around Atlanta measuring people's cramped apartments? We don't need the money. Focus on the house, on yourself. The wife of a successful entrepreneur should look the part, not like someone hustling a second shift." At the time, it sounded like care, like love. She agreed. She quit. And little by little, without noticing, she became the polished, well-groomed ornament in Achilles' life. She managed the condo, cooked, kept fit, saw the stylist, the esthetician, the trainer. She welcomed him home each day with a soft smile. She never complained. She never argued. And without realizing it, she disappeared into the background of her own life. She was convenient. That was the role she played now. Achilles walked into the bedroom, fastening the cuffs on his pristine white shirt. He looked impeccable, the custom-tailored suit framing his toned physique, his fade sharp, his hair perfectly styled. A faint, expensive cologne drifted through the room. At 45, he carried the confident, well-fed swagger of a man who believed he had the world exactly where he wanted it. "Oh, you're wearing that dress," he remarked, barely glancing at Zahara. "All right, it's fine. Just don't overdo the makeup. And try not to look bored tonight, okay? There'll be important people there. I don't want anyone thinking my wife is dying of boredom at the gala." Zahara swallowed the tight ache in her throat and simply nodded. Remarks like that used to cut deep. Now, they drifted past her like irritating background noise, sharp enough to sting, but not enough to break skin anymore. The gala was held at one of Midtown Atlanta's most exclusive restaurants. Panoramic windows showcased the sparkling city skyline. Ambient lighting glowed softly, and waiters in white gloves glided between meticulously set tables. About 30 guests filled the room, agency staff, executives, partners, clients all dressed to impress. Champagne in hand, buzzing with energy, Achilles plunged into the crowd instantly, shaking hands, slapping shoulders, embracing colleagues, absorbing praise like sunlight. Zahara followed a step behind, smiling when needed, exchanging polite, surface-level conversation. A client's wife, an elegant woman in her late 50s, leaned toward her with a warm smile. "Zahara, darling, what's your hustle? Are you in media too?" "No," Zahara answered lightly, though the words felt stiff. "I'm a homemaker." "Oh, how lovely," the woman sighed. "So you have time for your home, maybe a garden. I haven't worked in almost 10 years. Honestly, it's a blessing not being tied to a schedule. You can do whatever you want." Zahara nodded politely, but inside, the words scraped against her. Do whatever you want. She couldn't remember the last time she'd done that something she wanted. Not something Achilles needed, or something the household demanded. At the main table, Achilles took his rightful place at the head, and Zahara sat beside him. He was in his element, effortlessly commanding the attention of everyone present. He joked, he charmed, he told dramatic stories of demanding clients. Laughter rippled through the table again and again. Zahara sat quietly, taking small sips of champagne, smiling when appropriate, invisible in plain sight. The director of the parent company, a tall, broad-shouldered man with silver hair and a booming voice, stood and lifted his glass. "Friends, tonight we're celebrating more than just a successful deal. We're celebrating a true breakthrough for the agency. And it's all thanks to the talent, persistence, and remarkable charisma of our Achilles. Let's raise a glass to him." The room erupted into applause. Heads turned. All eyes were on Achilles. He rose with a practiced look of modesty, though Zahara saw the satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. Thank you, my friends," he began. Zahara's chest tightened. She knew this tone, the smooth buildup before he launched into something grand and polished. "You know, success is always a team effort," Achilles continued. "Without you all, I wouldn't have achieved any of this. You're the best team anyone could ask for. More applause, more cheers." Achilles paused, scanning the crowd with a dramatic flourish. Then his gaze landed on Zahara. Something sharp, almost mocking, flickered in his eyes. Her spine chilled instantly. Something was coming. Something she wasn't prepared for. "And also," Achilles said, smirk widening, "I want to raise a glass to my wife." "My Zay!" Achilles lifted his glass a little higher. "To my youthful mistake." Laughter exploded around the ballroom, loud, genuine, delighted. Someone clapped. Someone whistled. Achilles grinned proudly, basking in the reaction, convinced he had delivered the joke of the night. He turned to Zahara, expecting her to laugh along, to play the dutiful wife who always supported his humor, even when it cut straight through her. But this time, something inside her didn't simply break. It shattered, sharp and sudden, like thin ice splintering beneath a heavy step. Zahara held a frozen smile, the kind that stretched across her face without ever touching her eyes. A glacial cold washed through her. A youthful mistake. That was what he called her. In front of colleagues, clients, strangers. 20 years of marriage, reduced to a punchline. 20 years of sacrificing her own dreams for his career. 20 years of pretending his disrespect didn't hurt. 20 years of ignoring his infidelities. The secretary from 3 years ago. The client on that business trip. 20 years of letting him treat her like curated furniture in his perfectly styled life. And now, a youthful mistake. Zahara raised her glass and smiled politely. No one noticed how hollow her expression was. She drained her champagne in one swallow, the bubbles burning her throat, snapping her fully awake. Dinner carried on. Achilles was radiant, collecting praise, laughing loudly, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed. Twice he patted her shoulder, the way one might pat a pet. "Don't be mad, it was a joke." She nodded, smiled. Inside, she felt herself drifting away, not breaking down, but pulling free, rising above the scene like a spectator watching the final moments of a doomed play. A young employee, maybe late 20s, leaned toward her with sympathy. "Don't mind him," she whispered. "Men say stupid things. My boyfriend does it all the time. He never thinks before he speaks." Zahara looked at her, bright-eyed, ambitious, full of plans. And suddenly, Zahara saw herself 20 years earlier. Hopeful, impressionable, helplessly in love. The pity she felt wasn't for the young employee. It was for the girl she herself used to be. "Thank you," Zahara said softly. "I'm fine." But nothing was fine. Something had shifted permanently. The evening dragged on, though Zahara barely felt present. She ate mechanically, responded automatically, smiled robotically. When Achilles became engrossed in a conversation about a new project, Zahara slipped out to the balcony for air. The city glittered below. A cool wind swept through her hair. She gripped the railing, staring at the lights. When had everything changed? When had she stopped being a person to him and become simply a prop in his success story? When did his little remarks turn into big wounds? And when had she allowed it? She remembered wanting to sign up for design classes last year, to reclaim the career she'd abandoned. Achilles had laughed. "Why? You haven't worked in 20 years. Who's hiring you now? Focus on fitness. You've put on a little weight, anyway." She'd stayed silent. She'd skipped the classes. She went to the gym instead. 6 months ago, she had suggested a romantic weekend in the Appalachians. Just the two of them, like the early days. Achilles brushed it off. "No time for that. My project's on fire. And what would we even do up there? You're not the same girl who could sleep in a tent anymore." Every time she swallowed the hurt, telling herself it didn't matter. That stability mattered more. That every marriage went through phases. But tonight, youthful mistake was the final blow. Zahara returned to the dining room. Achilles didn't even notice she'd left. She sat down, finished her champagne, and felt something unusual. Calm. Crystal clear, unmoving calm. The decision formed in her mind, firm, final, irreversible. No scene, no tears, no confrontation. It would be pointless. Achilles would never understand. He truly believed he'd done nothing wrong. To him, she really was a mistake he didn't have the energy to undo. But she would show him exactly what kind of mistake she could be. The gala wrapped after midnight. Achilles, drunk and euphoric, talked non-stop during the drive home. "Did you see how well it went? Incredible. This contract could open doors in Europe, maybe even an office there. Can you imagine, Z? Are you listening?" "Yes, I'm listening," she murmured, eyes fixed on the passing city lights. "And stop pouting about the toast. It was a joke. Everyone laughed. You've lost your sense of humor." Zahara remained silent. Sense of humor? No, she hadn't lost hers. He just stopped being funny. At home, Achilles stumbled into the bedroom and crashed onto the bed fully dressed, snoring within minutes. Zahara stood in the doorway, watching this man she'd spent 2 decades with, and felt nothing. No love. No hate. Not even sadness. Just emptiness. She turned and walked to the kitchen. She boiled water, took her favorite mug, the one with the blue forget-me-nots her mother had given her, and sat at the table. The condo was quiet. Only the ticking of the clock and the hum of the kettle filled the air. Zahara began to plan. She sipped chamomile tea, the clock reading 1:30 a.m. Achilles' snoring drifted through the walls. Normally she would cry, then convince herself tomorrow would be better. Not tonight. Tonight, she felt clarity sharp as glass. His words echoed again. A youthful mistake. This time, they didn't hurt. They motivated. Zahara opened her laptop and logged into their joint bank account. The main household account held a comfortable six-figure balance. Achilles controlled it obsessively, giving her a debit card with a low monthly limit, monitoring her purchases like a principal checking a student's report. But what he never knew was that not all that money belonged to him. 3 years ago, Zahara's grandmother had died, leaving her a small inheritance. Zahara sold her grandmother's home in South Carolina and deposited nearly $100,000 into their joint account money, used as the down payment for the Buckhead condo. Perfect, Achilles had said. It'll go toward our home, joint property. Yet the condo title read, Achilles' Smay, his alone. Zahara felt anger rise, not hot and wild, but cold and focused. How blind she had been. She opened a new tab and logged into the personal bank account she had opened quietly a month earlier. A whisper of independence she hadn't known she would need. She confirmed the routing numbers. Then she began transferring the funds. Not all at once that would trigger alerts. $3,000 first, then $2,000, then $4,000. Calm, methodical, steady. Within an hour, nearly $90,000 rested safely in her personal account. Achilles would rage in the morning, but he could do nothing. Every transfer was legal. She had full access. She closed the laptop. Next came the safe. Zahara entered the study. His mahogany desk gleamed. Shelves of business books he never read stood polished and untouched. She walked to the wall, safe. Did she know the combination? Of course. Achilles was arrogant, but predictable. The code was their wedding date, June 15th. The very date he mocked tonight. She entered the numbers. The lock clicked open. Inside, neatly stacked cash, legal documents, stock options, securities, a velvet box holding gold cufflinks his late father had left him. Zahara took everything: the cash, the documents, the cufflinks. Let him feel loss for once. She moved to the living room cabinet and pulled out the folders of paperwork: marriage certificate, passport, condo documents. There, the condo purchase agreement, with an appendix confirming her $100,000 payment. She photographed every page. Next, 3 years of bank statements. Their repeated transfers of $500 to an unfamiliar account for 18 months. So the mistress wasn't a 3-year fling. It was an ongoing financial arrangement. Zahara photographed everything. Then, tucked in a corner of the cabinet, she found an old folder: their past, college photos, their simple wedding, their first apartment with champagne in plastic cups. She stared at the images. She couldn't pinpoint the exact moment things changed. Maybe there was no single moment. Maybe it was gradual. With every new success, Achilles climbed higher, and she stayed where she was, until eventually he began looking down at her. Zahara closed the folder. She didn't need the photos anymore. The past had died tonight, right there in that restaurant, with his toast. The clock read 3 a.m. Achilles was still asleep. Zahara returned to the kitchen and opened her laptop. She navigated to an airline's website. Tickets to where? Somewhere far, somewhere no one knew her. Somewhere she could breathe. Milan. The name surfaced from memory like a forgotten dream. She had always longed to see Italy, its cathedrals, its streets, its art. Achilles had promised to take her countless times, but there had always been a meeting, a project, a priority more important than her. The dream had stayed a dream. She found a flight leaving at 8 a.m. Direct. One ticket. Business class. $200 expensive, but she would pay with his card, the one connected to their joint account. She clicked book, typed in Achilles' card details, and watched the screen flash. Payment successful. Her ticket to a new life. Next. Accommodation. Zahara opened a rental website and searched for Milan. Studios. Rooms. Tiny apartments tucked between narrow cobblestone alleys. She chose a small but beautiful flat downtown, a few streets from the Duomo. 1 month's rent, $2,200. She booked it, paid with his card. Done. Zahara leaned back in her chair. A strange calm washed over her. In a few hours, she would leave everything behind. She returned to the bedroom. Achilles lay sprawled on his side, arms stretched out, mouth slightly open. His face held the same expression of satisfied arrogance he'd worn the night he humiliated her. Zahara paused at the doorway. 20 years. Half her life. She had loved this man, handed him her youth, her time, her dreams, and he had called her a mistake. No, Achilles. The marriage wasn't the mistake. The mistake was allowing your disrespect to become normal. She opened the closet quietly and pulled out a small carry-on suitcase. She packed with precision Spartan, intentional. Only essentials. A few outfits, underwear, makeup bag, documents, passport, condo paperwork, bank statements, evidence photos stored on her phone, laptop and chargers, and her mother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd worn tonight. The only other thing she kept was a single photograph of her mother. Nothing more. Clothes could be replaced. Objects didn't matter. Freedom did. She closed the suitcase gently and carried it to the hallway. Then she returned to the kitchen to check the time. 3:30 a.m. 3.5 hours until her flight. She would call a cab at 6 Greik. It would take about 40 minutes to reach Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Zahara sat at the table, poured herself another cup of tea, and took a slow breath. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. Just like that, an entire life was unraveling in a single night. And strangely, she didn't feel pain. She felt light, unburdened. Zahara thought back to the last 3 years. Achilles, working late more often. Stopping the small talk, the check-ins, the simple, "How was your day?" He had even forgotten her birthday last year. Completely forgot. He came home late, and when she timidly reminded him, he shrugged. "My bad. I was swamped. We'll celebrate this weekend." They never did. 6 months ago, when she came down with the flu, her fever spiking to 103 degrees, Achilles was on a business trip. He didn't call. Not once. Zahara lay alone in the silent condo, shivering under blankets, forcing herself to make broth, swallowing pills like a machine. She recovered by herself. When he finally returned a week later, he tossed out a casual, "So, you good now?" and moved straight on to his own concerns. There was a time he wasn't like this. When they were students, if she so much as sniffled, he would bring orange juice, tuck her in, sit at her bedside and read to her. When she got strep throat, he spent 3 days in her dorm room making honey tea and buying her medicine. Back then, she mattered. Back then, she was not a mistake. Back then, she was the center of his world. What happened to that Achilles? Or, had he never really existed? Had he always been this man, hidden behind the mask of a devoted boy in love? Zahara exhaled and shook her head. It didn't matter. The past was unchangeable. The future wasn't. She walked through the condo, taking in everything she'd silently lived with. The living room, filled with expensive furniture he'd chosen without even asking her. The walls, covered with modern abstract art she disliked, but he declared cultured. The kitchen packed with high-end appliances she barely used because he always preferred takeout. The bedroom, a massive bed, where they had slept like strangers for years. 2 bodies, 2 worlds, never touching. This wasn't her home. It was a luxury cage. Zahara stepped into the bathroom and stared at her reflection. Her face looked tired, but calm. Her eyes were steady, determined. She opened her makeup bag and pulled out a tube of bright red lipstick, fiery, bold, the one she'd bought a year ago, but never wore, because Achilles had sneered, "What are you working the streets? Wear decent colors." Zahara uncapped the lipstick and painted her lips a brilliant red. Defiant. Alive. She looked at herself and smiled softly. There. Much better. Then she turned toward the wall mirror and wrote in large strokes, "Mistake corrected. Simple, clear, perfect. Back in the kitchen, she checked the time. 5 a.m., time to go. She ordered a rideshare to the airport arrival in 15 minutes. While she waited, Zahara gathered the last few items. The keys to his precious SUV, the silver sedan he babied more than he cared for her. She took the keys and the vehicle title. Let him hunt for it later. The documents from the safe were organized in her folder. Cash tucked into her purse. Laptop, phone, chargers, everything essential. She walked through the condo one final time, then stopped quietly at the bedroom door. Achilles was still asleep, breathing deeply, peaceful and oblivious. He had no idea that in just a few hours, his world would be flipped upside down. Goodbye, Achilles, Zahara thought. Thank you for the lesson. You taught me exactly what no woman should ever accept. And I finally learned it. She walked to the hallway chest, slipped off her wedding ring, gold with a tiny diamond. Once, it symbolized forever. Now, it was nothing but metal. She placed it next to the apartment keys. Her phone buzzed. Your driver has arrived. Zahara put on her coat, grabbed her suitcase and bag, and opened the door. Night still lingered, but the sky in the east was beginning to lighten. Dawn. A new day, a new life. She stepped out of the condo, closed the door quietly behind her, and took the stairs. She didn't want the elevator ding to echo through the hall. Outside, the rideshare waited. The driver, a middle-aged black man, stepped out, lifted her suitcase, and asked, Airport, right? Yes, Zahara replied, settling into the back seat. As the car pulled away, she turned to look at the building. Dark windows, silent walls. On the fourth floor, her old life slept peacefully, while she headed toward her new one. Atlanta was still half asleep. Empty streets, scattered headlights, quiet intersections. The car hummed along smoothly, and with every passing mile, Zahara felt lighter. The driver didn't pry, didn't chatter. She appreciated that. After a while, he asked softly, You leaving for long? Zahara breathed in, then said, Forever. He nodded once. I got you. They arrived early, no traffic. She paid, took her suitcase, and entered the terminal. Only a few travelers were moving through the quiet airport. At the check-in counter, she handed over her passport and ticket. Business class to Milan, the agent smiled. Boarding in 90 minutes? Any checked bags? No, just carry on. Zahara moved through security and found a seat by a large window. Outside, dawn was unfolding. Lavender, pink, gold. It was 6:30 a.m. Achilles was still asleep. In a few hours, he'd wake up, expecting coffee. Expecting her. He'd search the bedroom, then the kitchen. Then he'd see the message on the mirror. Then the empty safe. Then the drained accounts. Zahara smiled faintly. Seeing his face in that moment would be interesting. She opened her phone, pulled up his contact, hesitated only a second, then hit block. Done. The last cord cut. At 7:30, boarding was called. Zahara stood, gave the city one final glance, and headed toward the gate. Below, Atlanta was stretching awake. For millions, it would be an ordinary day. For her, it was the beginning of a completely different life. She took her window seat in business class. A flight attendant offered champagne. Zahara accepted and sipped slowly, the bubbles dancing on her tongue. Outside, the plane ascended. The city shrank, shrinking into a patchwork of tiny blocks. Goodbye, old life, she thought. Hello, new one. Whatever you are, you won't be worse than what I left. She leaned back, closing her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt truly, completely free. Meanwhile, far below, Achilles blinked awake and grimaced. His head throbbed. His mouth felt like sandpaper. A brutal hangover. How much had he drunk? Champagne? Whiskey? Someone definitely handed him cognac, too. He squinted at the clock. 11:45 a.m. Saturday. He could sleep in. He smirked, remembering last night. The laughter, the applause, the toast. He'd been perfect. Impressive. The star of the evening. Yeah, he muttered to himself. Still got it. He pushed off the bed and staggered to the bathroom. Cold water helped a little. When he looked up, he froze. Written across the mirror in red lipstick, "Mistake corrected." He stared, confused, irritated. Was this a joke? He touched the letters. The lipstick was fresh. "Z?" he called, stepping out of the bathroom. "Zahara? What is this childish mess?" Silence. "Z," he tried again, louder. Nothing. He walked through the condo. Kitchen empty, no breakfast, no coffee brewing. Her mug sat on the counter, clean, unused. "Zay, stop playing. Where are you?" Living room, empty. Bedroom, unchanged. He checked the closet. Her clothes still hung neatly, her shoes lined up perfectly, but her small suitcase was gone. His heartbeat stuttered. He ran to the living room cabinet and flung open the folders. Marriage certificate, gone. Her passport, gone. Condo documents, gone. "Damn!" he whispered. Panic shot through him. He sprinted to the study, fumbled with the safe code. Twice wrong, finally got it open. Empty. Cash. Gone. Documents gone. Even his father's gold cufflinks gone. Achilles stood frozen, staring into the hollow metal box. A cold wave broke over him. This couldn't be happening. "If you have a claim, you may contact the court." The court? Achilles almost swallowed his tongue. "Are you kidding me?" he barked into the phone. "I regret that we cannot assist you further. Have a good day." Click. Dial tone. Achilles hurled the phone onto the sofa, pacing the room like a caged animal, gripping his hair. Think. 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 What was he supposed to do? Where could she have gone? He snatched the phone again and started dialing. First, Marcus. College buddy, reliable. Or at least, usually. "Marcus, have you seen Zay? Did she call you?" "Zay? No. What's going on?" She disappeared. I can't find her." "Disappeared? Did you call the police?" "No, I don't know. She left. Took the money, the documents." "Wait. So she didn't disappear? She left you?" "I don't know. Have you seen her? Yes or no?" "No, Achilles. I haven't. Maybe you two had a fight. It'll blow over." Achilles hung up mid-sentence. Next friend. And another. And another. Same confusion, same shock. No one had spoken to her. No one had seen her. Then he called his mother. Her sharp inhale crackled through the speaker. "Zay left?" "Yes. Do you know where she is?" "Achilles, did you hurt her feelings?" "Hurt her feelings? Mom, she stole the money and ran." "People don't just run away like that, son," she said gently. "Think. Did you argue?" "No. Everything was fine. We were at my corporate gala last night. Everything was perfect." "Calm down. Maybe she just needed space. Call her in a few days." He hung up. Space? Space? $200,000, an empty safe, the passport, and a business-class ticket to Milan. That wasn't space. That was escape. His head pounded harder. Hangover and panic were crashing into each other like waves against rocks. The phone rang again. Achilles nearly tripped, racing to grab it. "Zay? Zay?" A cold voice cut him off. "Achilles!" His mother-in-law. His stomach dropped. "She's gone," he said quickly. "Do you know where she is?" "She left, she took money." A long, icy pause. Then, "She left. Interesting. Why do you suppose that is?" "I don't know. That's why I'm calling you. Maybe she came to you. No, she didn't. But if she does, I'll tell her you called." Although her voice sharpened to a blade, I doubt she'll want to speak with you. "Why? What do you mean?" "I mean," she said slowly, clearly, "that my daughter endured your disrespect for 20 years. And it seems she finally reached the end of her patience. Goodbye, Achilles." Click. Disrespect. Disrespect? What disrespect? What was everyone talking about? He provided for her. He bought the condo. He paid the bills. She had everything she needed. Didn't she? He threw the phone, hard. It crashed against the wall. The screen cracked like a spiderweb, still glowing. Achilles slid down to the floor, right in the middle of the cold, silent living room. The same room she'd walked through for years, with quiet footsteps and swallowed words. And for the first time in a very long time, tears slipped down his face. Not the soft tears of sadness, but hot, furious ones. Tears of rage, of helplessness, of sheer blinding confusion. Because the truth was finally clawing at him. He had no idea who his wife truly was, and no idea what he had just lost. A view of narrow, winding streets and terracotta rooftops stretched out from Zahara's apartment window. In the distance, the spires of the Duomo rose majestically against the morning sky. Warm sunlight spilled into the room, and for the first time in many years, Zahara felt she could breathe freely. A week had passed since her arrival. The first few days, she wandered the city without purpose, strolling the cobblestone streets, slipping into small cafes, sitting on park benches, and simply watching people go about their lives. She needed time to let it sink in. This wasn't a dream. She had truly left, thousands of miles away from her old life. Her phone had blown up with calls all week. Achilles had called from every number he could think of. She didn't answer. She blocked them one by one. Then came messages across apps, texts, even social media. "Zahara, call me. We need to talk. You had no right. Return the money immediately." She ignored them all. Finally, she deleted all the apps except email, just in case something truly important came through. But so far, nothing. Zahara sipped her cappuccino, savoring the thick foam. Milanese coffee was different from back home, stronger, richer, with a subtle bitterness that made it feel alive. Yesterday, she had wandered into a small corner cafe. The smell of fresh baking filled the air. A woman in her 50s, stout with gray hair, pulled into a loose bun, and kind brown eyes, greeted her warmly. "Buongiorno," she said. "Buongiorno," Zahara replied uncertainly. "Cappuccino, per favore?" That was almost all the Italian she knew. The woman nodded and began preparing the coffee. Zahara took a seat by the window. Moments later, a mug crowned with perfect foam appeared, alongside a croissant. "I didn't order the croissant," Zahara said in English. The woman waved her hand. "A gift. You're new here, yes?" "Yes, I've seen you around." She pulled up a chair, settling across from Zahara. "My name is Julia. This is my cafe. I've been here 20 years. "I'm Zahara. Just arrived, not vacationing," she said. "I'm starting over." Julia's eyes softened, a flash of understanding crossing her face. "Ah, capisco. I understand. I started over once too. 20 years ago, I left my husband. He drank, he hid, he treated me like property. I took my daughter and left Sicily for Milan. No money, no job, just a single suitcase." Zahara froze, mug in hand. "And how did you manage?" Julia smiled. "Many ways. First a waitress, then a dishwasher. I saved, learned to cook. 5 years later, I opened this cafe. Small, but mine. My daughter grew up, built her own life in Rome. And I'm happy here. You know what the hardest part was?" "What?" "Believing I had the right to happiness. My husband drilled it into me that I was nothing, that I couldn't survive without him. I almost believed it. But then I realized, it's better to fall apart than to live with someone who doesn't value you." A lump rose in Zahara's throat. This stranger had read her story in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Julia asked. "For sharing that. I needed to hear it." Julia patted her hand. "Come back any time while you get settled. Women have to help each other." From that day, Zahara visited Julia's cafe every morning. They talked. Julia taught her phrases in Italian, shared the best shops and markets, and recommended language courses. Now, a week later, Zahara stood by her window again. She had enrolled in an intensive Italian course, 3 hours of class every day. Her classmates were all foreigners, a young Brazilian programmer, a Japanese art student, and an older German couple. Each of them was starting a new life, and no one asked unnecessary questions. During the third lesson, the instructor, a young Italian named Luca, asked what everyone did. "I'm a programmer," said the Brazilian. "I study art," said the Japanese woman. When it was Zahara's turn, she hesitated. I'm an interior designer." Her voice wavered. She hadn't worked in her field for 20 years. Luca simply nodded. "Benate, there's plenty of work for designers in Milan." After class, the Japanese woman approached her. "Hi, I'm Yuki." "Hi," Zahara replied. "You really are a designer?" "I was," Zahara admitted. "I haven't worked in a long time." "Do you want to get back into it?" Yuki asked. Zahara paused. 20 years ago, it had been her dream. Then, domesticity, Achilles' career, and her own resignation had suffocated it. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe you should try," Yuki encouraged. "I know a small design studio looking for an assistant." Zahara hesitated. She hadn't worked in decades. Who would hire her? Then she remembered Julia's words. "The hardest part is believing you have the right to happiness." "Okay," she said. "Give me the contact." Yuki wrote down the number and address. Zahara stared at it for a long moment, then dialed. A pleasant woman answered, introducing herself as Alessandre. "Yes, we need an assistant. You can come tomorrow for an interview." "I don't speak Italian very well," Zahara warned. "No problem, we speak English too. Come at 2 Armaio." The next day, Zahara arrived promptly at 2. The studio was in an old building with high ceilings and enormous windows. Paint and wood filled the air, sketches hung on the walls, and a corner was stacked with fabric, tile, and wallpaper samples. Alessandre, in her 40s with a short haircut and bright lipstick, greeted her energetically. "Tell me about yourself." Zahara gave a concise account: her degree, her early work experience, and her long break. "Why the break?" Alessandre asked. "Family," Zahara answered simply. "But now I'm ready to return." Alessandre nodded without pressing further, then handed her a folder. "Take a look. A client wants to update her bedroom." "What would you suggest?" Zahara studied the sketches. Ideas swarmed her, as if a part of her mind, dormant for decades, had suddenly awakened. "I'd use light tones," she began slowly. "White, beige, maybe soft pastels. A large mirror opposite the window to reflect light. Minimal furniture, natural textiles, linen, cotton, and definitely living plants to bring life to the room." Alessandre listened, nodding. "Good. And if the client loves dark colors? We could add a single accent wall," Zahara continued. "A deep blue or emerald green. Something rich. But keep everything else light. Otherwise, the room will feel heavy. And lots of lighting. Sconces, floor lamps, maybe LED strips for depth." Alessandre smiled. "You say you haven't worked in a long time. It doesn't look like it. You have an excellent eye for space." She leaned back. "When can you start?" Zahara blinked. "You're hiring me?" "Of course. We're a small studio. The pay isn't much, but the projects are good. Does that work for you?" "Yes," Zahara breathed. "Yes, absolutely." She walked out of the studio feeling lighter than air. A job. A real job. Her own income, free of Achilles, his money, and his shadow. 3 days later, she started. At 9 a.m., she stepped into the studio, and Alessandra immediately immersed her in work. Ongoing projects, client sketches, material samples. She introduced her to the tiny team. Just herself, a young man named Marco, who handled 3D rendering, and now Zahara. It was exactly the life Zahara once dreamed of. Meeting clients, discussing visions, sketching ideas, choosing textures, colors, fabrics. She had forgotten what it felt like to be needed, to see her work take shape in the real world. Her first project was for a woman recently divorced. "I want nothing that reminds me of the past," the client had said. "I want something fresh, something that's mine." Zahara understood her more deeply than she could admit. She designed a space in soft neutrals with bright accents, yellow cushions, turquoise curtains, lush green plants. When the renovation was done and the client saw the transformation, she burst into tears. "This is what I needed," she whispered, hugging Zahara. "This isn't just a new home. You helped me feel like I can begin again." That evening, Zahara walked back to her apartment, with warmth blooming in her chest. For the first time in decades, her life had purpose. Weeks turned into months. Zahara worked, studied Italian, and roamed Milan in the evenings, discovering hidden courtyards, tiny bookshops, antique stores with forgotten treasures, and peaceful parks full of soft murmurs and live music. One Saturday, she sat in Parco Sempione, reading an Italian book, slowly, with a dictionary, but reading nonetheless. A man in his 50s, glasses perched on his nose, gray at the temples, kind eyes, settled beside her with his own book. After a while, he glanced at her pages and smiled. "Dante. Bold choice." Zahara flushed. "Trying to. Not going very well yet." "Don't worry. Dante is difficult even for Italians. Are you new to Milan?" "6 months," she said. They talked. His name was Marco, Professor Marco, an art history lecturer at a local university. He spoke with quiet enthusiasm about Milan's hidden wonders. "A secret vineyard in the city center," he said, "and the Poldi Pezzoli. House museum, wonderful art, and almost always empty. Tourists never think to go." Zahara listened, smiling. He was educated, calm, warm, no pressure to impress her, no arrogance. Just a man sharing what he loved. They agreed to meet again, to walk, to explore the city. She didn't think of romance, not yet. It was simply companionship, and that alone felt like a gift. But Achilles still wouldn't stop reaching out. 6 months after she left, an email finally arrived. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Zahara, I realize I was wrong. Please forgive me. I didn't appreciate you. I behaved like a... But I want to fix everything. Please come back. I'll change. I promise. I need you. Without you, I realized how lonely I was. Give me a chance." Achilles Zahara read it twice, then closed her laptop. Once, these words would have meant everything. Once, she would have run back, desperate to believe him. But now she knew better. People don't change because of guilt or loneliness. He didn't miss her. He missed the convenience, the comfort, the structure, the unwavering support she had provided for 20 years. She opened a reply and wrote simply, "Achilles, you called me a youthful mistake, and you were right. But the mistake wasn't our marriage. The mistake was tolerating disrespect for 20 years. The mistake was giving up on myself. The mistake was believing love means one person gives while the other only takes. Thank you for the lesson. I've learned it. Don't contact me again. Live your life. I will live mine." She pressed send, and the last weight slid off her soul. 3 more months passed. Zahara settled into a rhythm. Work that fulfilled her. A language she was beginning to understand. New friends, Julia from the cafe, Yuki from the course, Alessandre and Marco from the studio, and Professor Marco, with whom she now spent weekends visiting museums, walking, laughing, sharing wine in quiet trattorias. One crisp autumn evening, they sat at a small cafe in a piazza as leaves rustled around their feet. Marco was talking about his students when he paused and looked at her thoughtfully. "Zahara, may I ask you a personal question?" "Yes," she said gently. "Are you happy?" She paused. Was she? She didn't have a husband. She didn't have the stability she had for 20 years. But she had work she loved. She had friends. She had the freedom to choose how to live, what to do, who to talk to. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm happy. For the first time in many years." Marco smiled. "It shows. When we met, you were like a closed book. Now, you've blossomed." Zahara finished her cappuccino and looked out at the piazza. People strolled, laughed, lived their lives, and she was part of it. No longer Achilles' shadow, No longer the wife of a successful entrepreneur. No longer a youthful mistake. Just Zahara, the designer building homes for people. A woman who had started over and didn't regret it for a second. Her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She glanced at it, paused, then pressed decline, and blocked it. The past stayed in the past. The future was here, in this city, in this life she had built herself. You know, Marco, she said, returning to their conversation, I realized something. Self-respect is more important than any comfort. It's never too late to truly live. And most importantly, you can't let others define your worth. You have to know your own value. Marco nodded. Wise words. And you're living proof that they work. They sat a little longer, finishing their coffee, and then walked through evening Milan. Zahara walked beside Marco, feeling, for the first time in years, whole and self-sufficient, not a part of anyone else's life. Somewhere out there, Achilles was probably still trying to understand what had happened, still angry, hurt, perhaps even suffering. But that wasn't her problem anymore. Her problem was learning to live anew, to enjoy the little things, to value the people around her, and to build a future without looking back. And she was succeeding. Zahara stopped on a bridge, gazing at the reflection of lights dancing on the water. Marco stood silently beside her, admiring the view. Evening Milan was alive, beautiful, full of possibility. Thank you, Achilles, Zahara thought, a faint smile tugging at her lips, for showing me who I don't want to be, for pushing me toward change, for calling me a mistake, because in that moment, she finally realized the only mistake she had made all those years was betraying herself. She wouldn't do that again. Never. The wind ruffled her hair. Somewhere, music played softly. The city lived its evening life around her. And Zahara smiled, turning toward the future, because that future finally, entirely, belonged to her. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on the story. On the screen, you'll also see 2 more life stories I highly recommend. There's so much more waiting for you on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next life story, with love and respect.